Hey everyone, my name is Edmund Munday. I'm a Senior Product Manager on Bitbucket Cloud. I'm going to be quickly recording another video in our series on how the Bitbucket Cloud team uses Jira Product Discovery, following on from the previous two videos that have come out over the past few weeks. We got some really great feedback on the previous videos, and one of the questions that came up the most was about the automation that was being used to power the the idea deferment process. So that being when we have an idea that is coming up during triage, and we know that it's something that we want to look at, but we just don't really have the resources to do it right now. Maybe we want to look at it in 3 months or 6 months. We have a process which we can kind of automatically make that idea go away and then come back 3 or 6 or 12 months later. So what I'm going to be doing today is I'm going to be walking you through how that process works, how that automation works. Full disclosure, when I created that first video, a bit of that was actually done as code. It wasn't done all using automation for Jira. And that was just because that was sort of what I was most familiar with and it was the easiest to kind of prototype. Yesterday I sat down for sort of an hour and figured out how to do it all with just automation for Jira. So there's no code involved in any of this. It's all done through just automation scripts in Jira itself. So once I'd done that, I realized actually quite a bit simpler to do it just in Jira automation, which is great. So I'll be walking you through how to do that today. So I've got some notes over here on the other screen. So if I sort of look away intermittently, you just know I'm just looking at my notes. So we have some steps we need to go through before we can get started. So the first thing we need to do is we need to create some statuses that are going to be used to indicate that an idea is being deferred for a period of time. So if you see here, I've got these ones here. That's the wrong one to look at. Statuses here. I have these three at the bottom, which are reviewing next quarter, reviewing next year, and reviewing in 6 months. These statuses are what drives part of the automation to determine when an idea will kind of bubble back up into view. So what I'm going to do is I am going to go down to my project settings, and I am going to go to my workflow. And you'll see here the workflow we have for this project and have this reviewing next quarter, reviewing 6 months, and reviewing next year. And so what happens is when I transition to one of these statuses, it will kick off the automation to start having that thing bubble back up later. So what you will need to do is you need to create statuses for each deferment period that you want to have. So if you want to have just a 3 month, you're probably only going to do review next quarter. If you want to have next 3 and 6 months, you'll need to do next quarter and 6 months. The naming doesn't really matter. You can name them whatever you want. Just make sure it's pretty clear what it's going to do. And make sure you write down the name, including the casing, because you will need to include that as part of your automation later on. So to add a new status, if you haven't got these, you're going to add a done status. You want these to be done statuses, not in progress or to do, because you want these issues to kind of disappear while they're in that status. And so putting them as a done status, it makes it much easier for Jira, just make them kind of go away. And what happens is when the automation fires again in say 3 months, we're going to set them back as a to-do status and they'll appear again in your views. So you're going to add a done status, and for the sake of the example here, I'm just going to call this review never. Enter, add. You'll see it pop up over here. You're probably going to drag it over here, and you'll need some kind of proposed status for this. So this is the status that you'll be looking at items when they're sort of going through the triage process. And then you need to set up the transitions to allow things to go from proposed to the review never. Now you can have this any status here, which basically just means that anything here can transition to review never. And that would actually mean that you could just go ahead and you'd be able to transition from proposed to that. I tend to avoid doing that just because it makes it a bit messy when you're looking at the status transition dropdown, because you could have like 30 statuses in there and it can get pretty crazy to manage. So I review the allow issues in any status to move to this one flag, and then you would just grab your proposed status and a little dot and you drag, drop, and then you just call this like review never. Or you could call it transition to review never, whatever you want to call it. This is because this is the name of the transition, not the actual status itself. And you go create, and then now you can transition from proposed to review never. And so in your case, you're probably going to have it going from proposed to review next quarter or reviewing in next 6 months. Once you've done that, make sure you write down the name of that status and include the casing. So the casing is not the one here. Include the casing from there. So get it the same casing. And then you would hit update workflow. Now I'm not going to update this workflow because I've already got everything I need, but you would hit update workflow and then you'd be able to start moving issues from the proposed state into the review in 6 months, review next quarter. In a bit, what we're going to do is we're going to set up an automation that is triggered by that state transition. And that's what we'll do to start working through the process of automating that bubbling back up later on. So I'm just going to delete this right now, and I'm going to close it. And we're going to go on to the next step. So I am going to go back to my views, and I'm going to go down to my automation example view. So I've created this view just for the sake of this video. So the next step of the process is you're going to need to create a field in JPD that's going to store the date that you want this thing to bubble back up at. So it'll be a date in the future where you want this thing to kind of reappear. So I'm going to go and add a field, and I'm going to create a new field. Now this needs to be a text field, a short text field, and I'm going to call this deferment date 1 because I already have one. I already have one called deferment date. I'll quickly show you how to get rid of that because I was practicing this before. So I already have a deferment date here. Sorry, I'm going to just go in there. I'm going to delete this guy. So to delete a field in JPD while we're doing this, little cog shows up when you hover over it, edit field. And down bottom, I'm going to delete field. And then you need to type the name of the field in because once you delete a field, you lose all the data in it, and there is no getting that data back. Trust me, no matter how much you annoy the JPD team to get it back for you, it's not coming back. And then you delete, and now it's gone. So now that I've cleaned out that field, I'm going to go and create it again. So create new field, go here, deferment date. And yes, I have the word deferment written on my other screen because I could never spell that properly for some reason. Short text, and then create. So deferment date, short text. The name doesn't really matter, but again, you need to write this down with that casing and just put it on a note somewhere. What matters is that it's a short text field. So create. All right, it's going to create it, and now you see it pop up on the view here already. So now this will be, so as I said before, this will be the date. This will be the field that holds the date when the automation is going to bring this idea back into our view. Cool. So next step we need to do is in Jira Product Discovery, all of these fields are created as custom fields. So custom fields are a really powerful feature of Jira that let you kind of just add whatever data you want to issues, but it can be a little bit complicated to use sometimes. The most complicated part of custom fields is that in the backend, in the database, that this field is not actually called deferment date. It's called something else. It has like an ID, which is normally just a list of numbers. But that means that when you want to update this field from like an automation or an API or anything like that, you actually need to have that ID, not this name. So there is a process to get that ID, which can be a little bit fiddly. So I'll walk you through that right now and show you how that works. So what you need to do to get the ID for this field is you will need to go to filters, and you want to just go to the view all issues toggle. So I've got that open over here already. And then what you want to do is you want to write a JQL query looking for an issue in that project. Now, if you don't know JQL, you might just need to go and look up some of the docs on that. JQL, again, is an extremely powerful feature of Jira. It's actually pretty simple. You don't need to know how to code or anything. It's more just like a math. It's closer to math than it is to actually coding. So to give you an example, I wanted to look at that issue, one of the issues from the view I had before, and that issue had a key of BBCPM-395. And so to get the JQL for that, I literally just write key equals BBCPM-395, search, and here it is. Now, the next thing you need to do to get the custom field ID is you go to columns, and you then search for the field, the custom field that you created before. So this for me was a deferment date. So I take that and go done. Now that will add deferment date to this table. And then the next step you need to do is you need to click the header of deferment date so that you're now sorting by this field. Now, what you can see if you go back to your JQL field here is that this JQL query updates as you interact with the table. So if I say I want to sort this by the updated date, you can see it actually adds that into the JQL query. Now, I've just gone and messed that up because I've now gone and sorted by both of them. Stop sorting by that. Just backspace all that, and I'll show you that again. So what I want to do is I want to say sort by deferment date. Not updated because I don't need that anymore. And you'll see here the JQL query has now updated itself. So I've got that original JQL query that I created. So key equals BBCPM-395. And then it's gone and added in this order by and then CF square bracket 13119 close square bracket. 13119 is the custom field ID for this field that I just created. So just copy that and again, save that to a note or something because you will need that in a second. Now, apologies if this has sort of gone quite deep down the rabbit hole really quickly in terms of complexity. I promise this is one of the most complicated parts of the whole process. Getting custom field IDs is just a bit of an annoying process. You very rarely ever need to do this, but it's just when you're doing automations and stuff like that that involve custom fields, you need to know the custom field ID, and that can be a bit annoying. So make sure you write down that custom field ID on a note, and then you will be using it a little bit later. So now that you have that, by the way, there will be a link to a support page in the description for this video, taking you through this process of finding that custom field ID step by step. So if you didn't keep up, then don't worry. There's a document that I'll attach here that you can actually go and read to know how to get the custom field ID, because that's a separate process to everything else. So I'm going to go back to my JPD project now, and what I'm going to do is actually start building out the automation, because we have everything we need now. We have the statuses, and I've written down the names of those statuses. We have this deferment date field, and I've written down the custom field ID for that field. And so now we can actually start building out the workflow. So there's two separate automations that we use for this process. The first one is when we actually set the status. And then the second one is one that runs daily and basically is designed to bring the deferred issues back up if they have hit their deferment date. So let's start with the first part. So I am going to go and I'm going to go to project settings, and I'm going to go drag the Loom controls down, and I'm going to go to automation. So automation is, if you're not super familiar with automation, automation is an incredibly powerful feature of Jira. And to be honest, when you combine custom fields in JPD with automation, you start to get to like crazy levels of capability and power that you can do with these things. And so you can see here we have a lot of automations in this Jira project, and it almost lets you build your own software on top of Jira. It's super, super, super powerful, particularly with JPD, which lets you create those custom fields like really, really easily. It's really, really cool, really powerful. So what you need to do first is you need to create an automation that is triggered by your issue being transitioned into one of those deferred states. So I have them here. So you see this here, I have on review 12 months, on review 6 months, on review next quarter. This naming convention that I'm using, like on something, 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 it's just a standard kind of naming convention that I use. It sort of is implied that this is going to run in response to an event happening, and that event being the review 6 months, review 12 months, review next quarter, whatever. So I'm going to recreate one of these from scratch. And what I might do real quickly actually is, just for the sake of the example, I'll go back in and I'll add that review never status back in, so I can show you with a workflow status that doesn't actually exist in the project right now. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to add this back in. I'm going to go review never. Make sure I get this casing right because it does kind of matter. Add that in. Drag it over here. Get rid of that, and we'll go from here down to there. Go transition to review never. Great. All right, perfect. And I'll update my workflow. I'll delete all this later on, it's fine. And then we have that new status, so I'm going to go back to my automation. So you don't need to do that review never step, just to be clear. You'll already have your statuses from before, so just use those. Now I'm going to create a rule. And then what you want to do is, the first thing you do in Jira Automation is you select what the trigger is for this rule to run. So I'm going to go and I'm just going to search for state, issue transitioned. So this basically says we're going to run this rule whenever a particular issue transition occurs. So I'm going to issue transition, and you select the status that you want the transition to originate from to run this rule. So for us, that is going to be the proposed state. So we only want to run this rule if an issue is transitioning out of the proposed state, and then you set the to status, and we only want to run this rule if they're transitioning to the review never state in our context here. So now in your situation, it would be the review in a quarter, review in 6 months, review in 12 months. Now you might be tempted to try and be more efficient here and add multiple statuses here, because you can add multiple statuses. So you might go, oh, I can add the 3 months, 6 months, and 12 months all here. Don't do that. You do need to have one separate automation for each status, because you'll be deferring the issue for a different amount of time depending on which status was transitioned to. So only to do these one at a time, you'll need to create one of these automations for each status that you're transitioning to. If you only support one, that's fine, you only need one. If you're doing three, you'll need to create three separate automations, but they're pretty quick, so that's fine. So I'm going to save this now. And then the next step I'm going to do is I'm going to add an action. And so this is basically, I'm going to do something when that occurs. And then what I'm going to do is I am going to edit the issue. And then I am going to get the deferment date. And then I'm going to populate a value into this field. So this is going to use sort of a bit of a more advanced element of automation for Jira. So if you're brand new to automation for Jira, apologies, this may go a little bit over your head, but it's actually pretty simple, so I'll try to sort of walk you through it. So so what I'm saying here is I want to populate this field, this deferment data field, with some information when this issue transition occurs. Now, what most of the time you're doing is you're probably putting some kind of like what we call static text in here. So you might be saying like, if you wanted to defer it to the exact same date every time, you would just write the date you want to defer it to in here. So I'd say something, and it has to be in a specific format. I'd say like 2024-08 09, September now, -01. And so this would be me saying I want to defer this until the 1st of September 2024. Now that's useful, but it's not what we want to do because we want this to be dynamic. We don't want to have to come in here and reset this automation to a new date like every day, or maybe even you could in theory come in here and every month you'd update it like 1 month further down the line, but it's a lot of work and you don't really want to be doing that. So what you want is you want this to be dynamic. You want this to actually put in a new date every single time the rule is run, and you don't want to have to keep that managed. Now, Automation for Jira actually supports that through they're called smart values, I think is the name for them. I'm probably getting the name wrong. Sorry, automation team, if I'm getting the name wrong. I think they're called smart values. And they let you kind of inject a tiny little bit of like code level smarts into your values. So there's some information about smart values down here. If you open up the more options toggle, and there's some documentation you can go to there. Also, if you just Google your automation smart values, there's a heap of information on them. So I'm going to hide that because that can be a bit more information than you need. And I'm just going to write a value in here. So to write a smart value, what you do is they always are wrapped in two sets of curly braces. So I'm going to go curly braces and then curly braces. And this is me telling Automation for Jira that I want to put a smart value in here, not just a static string. So first thing I'm going to do is I want to put a date. So the easiest way to start putting in dynamic dates is to go say now. Now, if I save this and ran it, it would work. What it would do is when I ran this transition, it would basically put the date at the moment that transition is executed into the deferment date field. That's cool, but it's not really useful because we actually need to put a date, which is like 90 days in the future. For the purpose of this example, assume I'm doing a 3-month deferment or 1 quarter deferment. So we don't want now in there. We want now, but in 3 months time. So the way I do that is I go now dot, because I'm gonna I'm sort of want to modify this this date in some way. I want to go plus days like that, and then I put parentheses. So to anyone here who knows how to code, you know exactly what I'm doing here. I'm basically calling a method. Who aren't coders, basically what I'm doing is I'm saying get the date that is now, and then I want to do something to it. I want to add some days to it. And because I'm working on the review next quarter automation here, I'm going to put 90 there because I want to review this in 90 days. So I'm getting now, and then I'm adding 90 days to it. If you're doing your 6-month automation or your 12-month automation, you're going to put a different number here. You're going to put 180, or you're going to put it 365, depending on what you want to do. You can put any number in that you want. It's as long as it's a whole number. All right, so now we've got now plus 90 days. So this would now return the exact date in 90 days time. Again, so we're getting close, but it's not quite what we need because this is going to return like a full like date stamp. And again, for the coders, you'll know what that means. If you're not a coder, basically it just means it's going to have like the date, it's going to have the time zone, it's going to have the time down to like the millisecond. It's a lot more information than you need. And having that would actually break the automation. Because what we're going to do in the future is we're going to have another automation that runs once a day, and it basically looks over this deferment date field and checks to see if the deferment date is the day at that point in time when that automation is running. And if it is, it's going to change the status. But now, if your deferment date field is holding the exact date down to the millisecond, the automation that's checking that is never going to run at exactly that millisecond. So you need a wider thing. So we just want to have just the day that we want this to come up. We don't want the time, we don't want the minutes, we don't want the seconds. We just want the date that we want this to come back. So the last thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to do another modifier. I'm going to call another method. I'm going to go dot, and I'm just going to go Jira date. Now, Jira date is just a date format. There's like 20 or 30 different date formats that you can get this to render with. Conveniently, Jira date is just the one that I want because a Jira date is a nice simple something like 2024-09-01. So it's kind of like year, month, day. That's what a Jira date is. And that's perfect because I'm going to run the automation, the other automation once per day. So as long as I can get that down to the date, the exact date, it will work. All right, so what I've basically done here is I'm saying when I transition to review never, I want to edit the deferment date field of the issue. I want to get the current date plus 90 days, and then I want to trim it down to just the date, getting rid of the time and the time zone and all that other stuff. This will all be documented in a page, by the way, that's going to go out with this video. So if you want to go and follow this through with specific instructions, all of these notes will be in that page, so you can just copy and paste this in. All right, so I'm going to save that. And then I'm going to name this thing. So I'm going to stick with my previous naming convention. So on review never. You would probably do like on review next quarter or on review next year, whatever you want to do. And then I'm going to turn it on. So it's now running. So now whenever I hit that transition, it should populate the deferment date with the date I want it to be deferred to. All right, let's test that. So I'm going to go back to my views. I'm going to go down to automation example. And so I've got a few things here. I'm going to grab this guy. And I'm going to set him to review never. So I've now made that transition. In the background, the Jira automation script has just run, as you can see. And that date got populated into that field, just as we were hoping it would. So it's gone and calculated today's date. It's then added 90 days, which would be the 30th of November, 2023. And it's trimmed it down to this format, which is exactly what we want. So now we're halfway there. We have set it up so that when I do that transition to review never, it gets the date that we want to transition when we want it to come back, and it's populated that into this deferment date field. The next step is, well, all right, when this date occurs, how do we set this back to proposed so that we can review it again? I'll show you how to do that. So what you're going to do is you're going to go back to your project settings and you're going to create another automation. And you'll see in here, I've got this on daily poll, which basically says every day I want you to run this batch of automations. And I've actually got a few in there, which is why it's called on daily poll, not resurface deferred issues or something like that. But I'll show you how to create your own one of these now. So I'm going to create a rule. This one's a little bit more complicated. So what we need to do is JQL. So you want a scheduled trigger for your automation. And what you want to do is you want to run the rule every 1 day. And then you can pick when. So for example, I would do it at about 2 a.m. Australia, Melbourne, because I'm based in Melbourne. Wherever you are, kind of set the time zone to that place and then set this to around about 2 a.m. The reason you want it to be around about 2 a.m. is because you don't really want anyone else to be messing with the Jira project while this is running, because it could just get confusing. So probably do this while everyone's asleep. So I'd be doing it at 2 a.m. Australian time. And it'll even tell you when the next time it's going to run would be. So you can know exactly when it's going to run. And then what you want to do is you want to tick this box that says run a JQL search and execute actions for each issue in the query. So I'm going to click that. And then I am going to write a piece of JQL. And again, if you're not super familiar with JQL, there's plenty of documentation around it. And you also, if you have specific questions, you can jump on the community, community.atlassian.com and ask questions. There's thousands and thousands of people who write JQL every single day, and they're always really happy to help out and show you how to do it. So the JQL that I'm going to use, and I suggest you basically use the same thing, but just swap out your stuff, is going to be this. You can't really read all that, so I'll walk through it with you. So the first step is project equals, and then your project key. So the project key is the kind of what all of your issues start with. So in my case, it is BBCPM and status in, and then you need to put all of your deferment statuses need to be written here as strings. And this is why it was important that you copy those down from before, including the casing, because it needs to be exact. So for the sake of the example, I'm only going to search for the review never. But if you've got multiple statuses, you need to include all of them in this query. So I would go review never and like that. But if I had more, if I wanted to get the review in 6 months, I would go comma and then double quotes is important for these. So I go review in 6 months. I'd add that in here as well. And basically what that's going to do is it's going to get all of the issues in the JPD project that we're working on, where their status is either review never or review in 6 months. So in a second, I'll show you the actual live one that I've got. It has the review in a quarter, review in 6 months, review in 12 months, all in here. And then what you want to do is you want to hit validate query. And I've broken something. Review in 6 months does not exist. Okay, it's probably review 6 months, maybe. 1 second. What did I call that? Reviewing 6 months. Well done. This is what happens when I don't check my notes. And so it will tell you if the status is wrong, which is great. So if you spelled it wrong or something like that, you'll know straight away. So validate query, cool. And it says that 1 issue found, because there's only 1 issue in the project that's actually in that combination of statuses. We primarily only use the defer 3 months and the defer 12 months, which is why none have shown up here. But what you want to make sure is that you've got at least 1 issue found. Otherwise, you're probably not doing it right. You do want to set an issue to one of these statuses before you do this as a test so that you can run this validation. Cool. And then you want to untick this only include issues that have changed since the last time this rule executed. The reason you need to untick this is because we don't expect these issues to change like ever, but this rule is going to run every single day. And the whole point of this rule is to identify things that were not due to resurface yesterday, but are due to resurface today. They won't have changed. And so you need every day to be hitting all of the issues in that status. It's important that you do make this only target these statuses, because otherwise you're going to be running this rule against every single issue in that Jira project every single day. And that can actually take a while. So you want to reduce the number of issues that you're sort of iterating over by only getting the ones in the statuses that you care about. So I'm actually going to remove the reviewing 6 months here for now and just have reviewing never. So untick that, and then you're going to go save. All right, so you've set up your trigger, which means that every day at 2 a.m., you're going to run that JQL query. You're going to get back all of the issues that match that query. And then what I want to do is I want to loop over all of those issues or iterate over all of those issues. What that means is I want to run a little automation once for every issue that is returned by that query. So I'm going to go for each. And then I think you want to do an advanced branch. No, you want to, oops, sorry. Yes, so then you want to run then you want to run a branch rule such related issue. So branch rule and run conditions and actions for these issues. So basically we're saying for every issue that's returned by that, run a section of automation. So you want to do it on the the current issue. So this has gone and gotten all the issues. Now it's iterating over each of the issues. And so for each run through this iteration, you want to use the issue that is the issue of the iteration. And it will restrict you to only working on issues within the project that you're working on. You can ignore that. That's fine. You don't need to go to other projects. So I'm going to go save. I'm saying, all right, run the JQL query, and then run an automation once for every issue that is returned by the JQL query. All right, so the next step you need to do is, so this is going to run once for every issue returned by the query, so you need to add a condition, and you need to do an advanced compare condition because we're looking at the value from a custom field, and you're also going to be using a smart value in that comparison. So you need to do an advanced compare condition. So what we're going to do is we need to get the custom field first to look at. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to say, if today is the day in the deferment date custom field, bubble this issue back up. And because this rule is going to run every single day, this will be fine. This will mean that at some point in the future, when you hit the day of the deferment date, this rule will run. It'll find all the issues that are deferring today, and it will return them back to the list, and you'll be able to review them again. So the first thing you need to do is you need to get the value in the custom field to compare against. And that is a little bit fiddly because we're using this advanced compare feature. So you're going to need to use another smart value here. So we start off with our open and close curly brackets. And then we want to get some values from the issue that's being iterated over. So I'm going to go to issue. So basically what we're saying is the issue that we're currently looking at. And we're going to go dot fields. So I want to get all the fields from that issue. And then I want to go dot custom field underscore. And then you want to go and grab that custom field ID that you looked up before at the start. And you want to put that here. So for me, the custom field ID was 13119. Put that there. Okay, so basically what we're saying here is we want to compare something to whatever is the value in custom field 13119, or whatever your custom field is, on the issue that's being iterated over. And we want to make sure, we want to see if it's equals. And then the second value we want to do is we're going to go back and we're going to reuse that the date smart value that we used the first time. So we're going to go, actually, sorry, no, we're going to use a different date value. We're going to go open and close our smart value, and we're going to go now, because we want the date that this automation runs. We don't want, like today when we're writing this will run in the future, and in the future it will get the value of whatever now is then. We don't want to add any days like we did before, because we want this to basically be comparing whatever's in this field to the actual date at the point this automation is running. But we still need to do that Jira date modification because we want to get the trimmed version of it so that we can match the date that's in the custom field to the date that is being returned by this smart value. So we would just go now.Jira date. So basically this would be for today, now.Jira date would be 2023-09-01 because today is the 1st of September 2023. So that's what this would return. And so hypothetically, if we had the date in the custom field as that same one, this would evaluate to true. So save. So now what we're saying is loop over all of the issues that match that JQL query. And if the date in the deferment date field is today, do something. And that do something is actually pretty simple. We're going to add a step, we're going to add an action, and we're going to transition the issue, and we're going to we're going to set it to proposed. And that's it. That's actually the automation part. So we're basically just going to say if the deferment date is the day that this automation runs on, set this back to proposed. And if you have any other things that you want to do when it is bubbled back up, like for example, we have a flag that says an issue is escalated, it has to be reviewed at the next PM meeting. So for our example, I would probably also set that escalation flag as true. You might not have that flag, but if you do, you can also do all that as part of this next step. So to save, and so this would be something like, daily deferment date check, you could call it. It doesn't matter, you can call it whatever you want. Turn it on. Great, that's done. Now what I'm going to do, last thing is I'm going to test it. Now I'm going to go back to the go back to my automation example. Now we have this deferment date here, but that's like 3 months in the future. So if I ran that rule now, it wouldn't do anything because it's obviously not the 30th of November today. So what I'm going to do to test it is I'm going to update this deferment date because this is just a string field. I can change this to whatever I want. And I'm going to go 2023. I'm going to change it to September 1st. So I've said, all right, pretend the deferment date was 2023-09-01, which is today. It's September the 1st. I'm now going to go back to the project settings. I'm going to go to the automation, and I'm going to go and find that automation I just created. Cool. And then I want to test it. So I'm going to hit run rule. I'm going to give it a little bit. Hopefully that's done already. I'm going to go to the audit log because it will show you all the runs. Cool. I can see there that it was done. So if you're having issues with the automation rules, the audit log is really, really powerful. This shows you basically every single execution of the rule, and if it fails, it will tell you, and then you can actually like dig down and you can see all the information. So it actually tells you what happened here. So it got the issues, it did the compare condition, it said this issue passed that condition, which means that it then transitioned it to proposed. So if I go back to my back to views, and if I go back to automation example, and look, that's now been set to proposed. So I didn't do that myself. What it did was it ran that rule and it set this, checked for this date and it set that back. Now, just to kind of prove to you that this works across multiple issues, I'm going to copy and paste this deferment date into there. I'm going to go turn, I'll show you the whole process and I'll update it manually. So we'll set this to review never, and we'll set this one to review never. Give it a second. What we'll do, you'll see in a second, it'll actually populate. See, it just populated that one, and this one more. That cool. So now these are both automatically. Stop with the pop-ups. These are now both set to that 30th November date that we said before. I didn't do that. That was done automatically when I set these to review never. Now I need to change these back to September 1st. And I'm going to change this one to September 1st too. And now what I'm doing, I'm going to rerun the daily automation again, because what I want to show you is that it doesn't just do it for one issue. It will actually iterate through all of the issues that match the criteria, and it'll set all of them back to proposed. So give me 1 second. Go to project settings, go to the automation, go to the daily deferment date check. I'm going to run that rule. It's going to run. I'll go to the audit log. You can see here it's in progress. It hasn't quite finished yet. Refresh that. Cool, that's now done. You see it took a little bit longer because there were more issues this time around. It's only a few seconds, but you can see that if you don't write that JQL query properly and you return like hundreds and hundreds of issues, this will take a long time to run. Back to the views, back to the automation example, and look, they're both now set to proposed. So what you would then have is you would have your triage view, which is basically filtered to only show things that are in this proposed status. And you're done. You've now built your deferment automation. So hope that was valuable. I'm sorry, this is a really long video, but it is a bit complicated. But yeah, if you have any other questions or you're interested to learn more about this stuff, feel free to comment on the video. You can also ask questions on community.atlassian.com. Yeah, we're always happy to help out. There's plenty, like I said, thousands of people in community, not just from Atlassian, from Atlassian users, and everyone is there super happy to help out. So feel free to jump on there and get more involved or post some questions on the video. Thanks.